Hello and welcome to this tutorial regarding entering materials cost into the Labor Pricing for a Profit software version 6.0. Materials make up a significant portion of our total revenue in our company. In fact, for the typical trades company, materials will make up roughly 30% of the total revenue. It also plays a significant part in covering our overhead. So we have to make sure that we get materials entered into our model as accurately as we can. Now, the addition of materials into our model is very simple. Let's go ahead and get started. To enter materials into our model, we're simply going to click on the cost input icon under setup in the left-hand toolbar. Once we do that, our cost setup window will open up, and as with the previous tutorials, the cost types is located on the right-hand side of the screen. We're going to be entering materials, so we'll simply click on the materials radio icon on the right hand side, and the screen will immediately change to allow us to enter materials themselves. When entering materials, we recommend that you enter one line item or one item itself for each department within your company. Now, there are cases where you may enter more than that. In some cases, you'll have materials in, let's say, your installation department that you mark up 25%, where another group of materials for that same department you mark up 75%. In that case, you may want to enter two separate line items, each dictating a different markup. But for the most part, we'll enter one material item for each department within our company. So to enter a new material item for our company, we're going to click on the New icon. When we do that, we'll get the materials entry window to open up. Let's start at the top and just work our way down through each of the individual items here so we can explain what each of them does. First off, materials description is just that. Which department are we working with in this particular case? So this will be materials for our service department. Now, as we move down from the description, we've got several other items that will dictate how we're going to spread these costs throughout the year to make sure our cash flow is as accurate as possible. The first one is the method to apply cost, and we've got several different choices: monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual, manual, or direct labor hours. I'm going to come back to this in just one moment because I want to share the rest of these with you so we can actually walk through some examples. The item starts in. This is telling the software what month does that particular expense start. Again, if it's a monthly expense and it starts in April, then January, February, and March won't have any materials cost applied to them. So we'll come back to that one. The next one in line is the monthly materials cost. So how much is it per, if we're set monthly, how much per month is this cost going to be? If it is annual, how much annually is it? If it's quarterly, how much is it per quarter? So the materials cost will be for the time period that you've specified. The markup is just that. What is the markup that you typically use for this particular department? If we're dealing with a service department, very typical markup is 100%. Now again, this is a markup, not a margin. So if you typically use a divisor, let's say you take your parts cost divided by 0.75. That's a 25% gross margin. That is not a 25% markup. The chart on the screen shows the difference between markup and margin. So if I wanted a 25% margin, I'll actually use a 1.33 multiplier, or a 33% markup. Again, the software uses a markup, and so make sure that we've got the right multipliers in there. And then annual materials revenue is a calculated field based on what you enter in for the fields above. And it will calculate what your total materials revenue, what you're actually going to sell that material for. So let's walk through a couple of examples here. First off, if I say that it's monthly and it's going to start in January, and I've got $10,000 per month, you'll see the software immediately over in the monthly allocation section starts applying $10,000 per month, and it's evenly throughout the entire year. Now, if I go in and tell the software that I use that 100% markup, it immediately reflects that in the revenue section. But it's the same and even throughout the entire year. Now, if I change the method to apply cost to quarterly at $10,000, now it's going to apply $10,000 for each individual quarter throughout the year. And again, if I simply change the item starts in, let's say February, it will immediately shift those dollars quarterly to match that, that setting. Now let's take a look at one of the other methods. Of course, if I use semi-annually, that's simply 2 times per year, and it's going to spread it accordingly. So again, the amount that we have down here in the semi-annual materials cost is just that. It's that amount per semi-annual period. Annual simply says 1 time a year. Manual lets me manually place those costs throughout the year as I want to. So at this point I could come in and I can say, okay, I've got $5,000 in March, and I've got $8,500 in April, and so on down the line. So the software will automatically start calculating and adding the markup to each individual month, but I control when the costs hit. Now the one final item choice that we have here in methods to apply is direct labor hours, and quite frankly this is probably one of the most accurate. Direct labor hours simply states that we are going to spread that material cost based on the number of hours we're working in the field. Obviously, the more time our technicians spend working in the field, the more materials they're going to go through, the more materials they're going to use, and the more revenue we're going to generate at that point in time. So by doing this, now you'll notice that we don't have a cost per period. Here we just put in an annual cost for the entire year. So in my service department, I used $45,000 in materials at 100% markup. The software then looks at the total billable hours that I had for each individual month as I set it when I entered my direct labor, my field labor employees. I dictated what each guy had as far as billable time and non-billable time. The software automatically adds up all those hours, and it knows that, okay, some months I have more hours. Here in July I've got 378, but in August I've only got 289. Well, if I have fewer billable hours, chances are I'm going to use less material, and so you can see here in the allocated cost, we've allocated more in July than we have in August. The software will spread that evenly throughout the entire year. Our recommendation is that you would typically use direct labor hours for this particular spreading of the material. Now, one quick note here. Just remember that the revenue will always take place in the same month that the cost takes place. So let's say you are an HVAC contractor and you bought a spring preseason order of equipment. So you took in all this equipment in the month of March or April. You bought $50,000 worth of equipment that'll carry you through the next few months. The software, if you don't reflect that on a direct labor hours basis, is going to show that you incurred the entire cost in the month of April, and all that revenue came in April as well. So just be aware of that when it comes time to looking at your cash flow projections within the software. At this point, we'll move forward just a little bit farther. Again, in the notes section, we can put in anything that we want. In this section, materials used in the service department. And then the last section that we have to deal with, just as with every other cost that we have, is the materials cost and income allocation. We can spread those costs across the various departments, but this particular case, these are materials that we're using specifically for our service department. So 100% of these costs and the revenue will go toward our service department. Once we have everything entered properly and we're satisfied, we can now click on the Accept button, at which time that item is now added to our list. We can see that it's materials for the service department applied based on direct labor hours. Our cost was $45,000. We had a 100% markup, which means we're going to sell that material for $90,000. Now we can go ahead and click on New and add our next material area. And again, that might be materials for the installation department, and so on down the line until we have all our materials accounted for in our software. This concludes this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll get into adding subcontractors to our software model. Thank you.